Oh, are you so sleepy? Have you had a tough morning of napping? Hi everybody, and welcome back to my channel. My name's Heather. This is Rycrafty, my channel where I talk all about my sewing and sometimes knitting. Today, we're back on the quilty business. So, I've done a couple episodes about this big yellow quilt that I'm making. I'll link them in the description below. The first one is about the fabric haul and the whole idea and inspiration for this quilt and the pattern. And then I think the last time I talked to you, I showed you how I sewed one set of 4 flying geese blocks using the technique in the Birdling Quilt pattern from Prairie Quilt Co. And I was also really overthinking making these tiny little 9 patches, the little checkerboards that go in the center of the quilt block. So right there, that's my single finished quilt block. You can see that center square is a little 9 patch of 2 of the patterned fabrics. And in that last quilt video, I divided up all my patterned fabric into sort of darker and lighter. In this case, because it's mostly yellow and white, the more yellow and the more white ones, because I wanted there to at least be some contrast in these blocks. Then I sewed them all up, and I just wanted to show you some of those, and then also talk about they're not half square triangles, the flying geese. This might be boring to some people, but I feel like quilty people enjoy this sort of thing. And part of my thing with quilts is I love looking at the details of them and really zooming in and going like, ooh, that fabric's the same as that fabric, which matches in there, and it only touches that other fabric 3 times in this quilt. And if it's something that's being made out of scraps, like I have this scrappy project where I've been doing really scrappy blocks on and off. It's just like a sewing palette cleanser. I love doing those, and sometimes I just pull out the finished blocks and just look through them because I love looking at a quilt and going, oh, that fabric came from when I made that dress. Oh, that fabric is from this project. I bought that fabric in this store. Like, I love all the little memories that are in the quilt. When I first started sewing, I would go into quilt shops and see all the bundles of the perfectly matched fabrics. And I remember thinking at one point, oh, well, why would you do that? The whole point of a quilt is to be scrappy and crazy and to have all those memories with all the different fabrics. I don't think that's for me, that sort of quilting where you have a whole line that is meant to be together and you use it together and it's perfectly coordinated. It should be kind of weird and crazy. The only quilt I've completed, all the fabric, is from one line from a fat quarter bundle I bought. This that I love so much is a fat quarter bundle that I bought, and all the matching solids that were recommended to me. So yeah, I grew out of that way of thinking. So when you make a bunch of flying geese, then there's a whole lot of trimming. And I've done all the trimming. Spoiler alert, I'm going to show you all those after the squares. But that has meant there's lots of strings, lots of threads, and little tiny triangles that have been cut off the flying geese. And I just realized, I think I must have shaken some out of here and onto the dog in my lap. I'm very sorry, sir. But anyway, these little 9 patches, they're so cute. It was a lot of fun sewing them together. I had just enough squares cut out. I have a few little squares left over. This is all that's left. But I didn't have enough of any 2 of these to make another block. I did have spare fabric I could have cut more little squares from, but I strategically used everything I had 4 or 5 squares of. So all these, there's 3 or less squares, unless you're one of the really sparsely patterned fabrics, which we will get into. I stacked them up just to have a way to organize them. This is also the other thing about me. I love that quilts look random, but there's effort that goes into making it look random, okay? Because real random, you could end up with the same 2 fabrics together in one of these little blocks if you really were just picking randomly. So I stacked these together with the same darker fabrics. So I just want to show you these. So this is like the yellow backed floral, and it's got the sort of scratchy, sketchy design. There were some very blank parts on that fabric, so they're very white, but I got a lot in there. There's that same fabric with this fabric, the bane of my existence, because I just cut the squares out. I cut a few strips and then cut those into squares, and didn't really look or think too closely about where the flowers were. And so you see I picked a good one for the center, but like this is mostly white with a tiny flower in there. This has this tiny flower. This is going to get cut off in the seam allowance. So that one's mostly white. This one, did with the honeycomb. I love that honeycomb fabric. So I did that. And then this one is all the ones with the gingham. So this is gingham and the honeycomb. And then gingham and this lovely sort of 70s bedsheet flower. I love that pattern. And that one was a sort of denser patterned fabric. So you always get something on one of these little squares. Even if it's just a little branch, like on that one. Not necessarily a flower, but there's a little branch. And then this, I like this because it was like a square pattern with a dot pattern. Fun to have that sort of opposing geometry. Then the darker yellow one in here is the one that had sort of the beehives, which you can't really tell. You can't tell what they are in squares this small, but it's just a nice darker yellow background. And again, here's that 70s flower. Here's the sketchy one. You got some good bits of this fabric in there that are pretty populated. This one had these little brown flowers, or sort of deep dark yellow flowers in stripes. And I didn't really worry about orienting things the same way, so some of them are going up and down, some are going sideways. The last dark color is this dark dot, sort of a medium yellow with a white dot. And I had to put this with the smaller dot. So that's the cream background with a few different shades of yellow tiny dot. So yeah, I had to put these two dots together. I just love the idea of them being together. And then we've got the dots with the dark yellow flowers that come in the stripes. And then here's the dots with the 70s flower. So that is not all the squares I needed. I needed a few more. And after making a few of these and being very conscious of pulling from my two piles of darker yellow or dark background versus paler background, I just decided to do some other ones, because otherwise it was going to look like I had very purposely put all the yellows versus the whites in these little 9 patches. So I took a few of the more densely patterned but pale backgrounded fabrics and put them together. So that's the honeycomb and the floral stripe. And I used the honeycomb because I knew you would always have some lines. You'd always be able to see. You'd never accidentally get something that is mostly white, or where like the flowers would be cut off when you sewed it. So I did that one. And then this dot was also very good, sort of pale but dense. And so I put that with the sketchy fabric that is in some places almost just plain cream. This one was the last one when I was really running low on squares that I had enough of, because you need 5 of one and 4 of another. So it's that sketchy pattern fabric again and the disappearing floral. And I picked the best I could of the blocks I had left. Again, I could have cut more, but I didn't. I didn't feel like it. So again, I put one good one in the center, and then these ones just have the tiniest flowers. This one, pretty much nothing. That's just plain. But luckily, this is pretty squiggly. And I think it's hard to tell on the camera, but the background of this flower one is cream, and the background of this sort of scribbly one is white. So in person you can see more of a difference. The other thing I was conscious of when I was doing this was not duplicating and not having, like, even as much as I love these 2 dots together, not having 2 the same. But yeah, happy to have these done. And then the other thing I finished was the 192 flying geese blocks are now not only sewn, but trimmed. Look at how many. Look at how many. So I've got my 4 colors. I'll get one of each to show. So I've got my 4 colors. I've got a pale yellow, and then that's the next yellow, and then that's yellow number 3, and this is yellow number 4, which is the one finished block. So I have 48 of each of these, although obviously 12 of the dark ones, which I think this yellow is called Honey. 12 of the dark ones are in that block. And so I think my next step in this crazy quilt is to start sewing these together in groups of 3, because as you can see in the block, it's grouped. Although you make 4 at a time with the technique, they're sewn into groups of 3 after mixing them up and muddling them up, so you don't get any of the try not to get any of the related pairs sewn together. To help me in the trimming of those, I trimmed a few on my mat just normally, but then I thought I have 180 something more of these to do, so I bought myself a spinny cutting mat. So you put this on the table, put the thing you want to trim on there, and then you can trim maybe 2 sides with your ruler without like doing weird things with your arms and your wrists. And then instead of picking it up and turning it around, you just turn this thing. It is a cheap one. I did buy it off Amazon, I know. I try not to buy too much from there. But it's a cheapy one from Amazon. It's just got this foam on this side that sort of sticks a little bit to the mat. There were some times when I was turning it where I was using the actual turn mechanism, and then there were other times where I was just like turning the whole thing and not using the turntable part. Very helpful, made it a lot easier to trim these almost 200 little triangles. And you also end up with a whole lot of this. So these are all the trimmings. The way the pattern is, what she recommends you do gives you a good amount on the edges of the flying geese blocks to trim off, which I found helpful because then you can get just about everything to the right size or in the right place with the 1/4 inch seam allowance just a 1/4 inch away from that point, so they'll all line up nicely. Some of mine will not maybe line up so nicely, but that's fine. That's a teeny tiny detail. But yeah, this is my little like garbage container that always lives on my sewing desk where I put all the thread ends. This is only a very few of the ends of the yellow trimmings. Although I did, because I've been emptying this into the kitchen garbage every so often. There's one point where I went into the kitchen for something else to throw something into the garbage. I opened it and thought, shredded cheese? I didn't have shredded cheese. And if I did, why did I throw it away? But it was all these little yellow trimmings from the flying geese. So yeah, I think next step, sewing the geese into 3s to later be turned into that. Also, what I kind of want to do next, although I'm not certain if it would be out of order or something I want to figure out later, these need to be divided up into the 4 colors. But yeah, so I kind of think what I want to do next is to decide which of each of these little squares is going to be with which of each of these 4 different yellows in the center, because you have to sew those little borders on around the square. And I feel like that might be a fun next thing to do before I get into the craziness of the geese. So like, for example, because I did 3 of these squares that don't have that darker yellow in them. I want to make sure they're each in a with a different shade of yellow. So I don't necessarily care which shades of yellow, but like I don't want the rest of these dark yellows to be these 3 guys, because again, that'll be a bit too samey, and I want to put some of that planned randomness in there. So I think each of these will be in a different shade of yellow, and then I just need to figure out how I want to divide these up, really. But yeah, I think that will be my next fun little task, and I want to do that next because it is quickly done. Because there's only 15 of these, because number 16 is there. I only have to sew the little border pieces on 15 of these, and that'll be much faster than sewing these 192 minus 12, these 180 triangles into groups of 3 will take longer. But if I do these little borders, I'll feel like I finished something. Sometimes I do have to plan my projects in that way to keep me interested and keep me working on sewing stuff, because sometimes I know it was the same with knitting. Sometimes I would just throw a baby hat into the mix just to finish something. And in a quilt, you've got all these steps, and I see each of those as like finished. Like I finished the squares, I finished the triangles. Next, I want to finish the borders around the squares. And then it's on to the millions and millions of geese. It's the next day, and look what I have. I did a bunch of quilt sewing yesterday, so now I have my little 9-patch checkerboards each in a lovely little frame. I love this one with the 2 dots. So this border color is, I believe, called Honey. And this one is Turmeric. And again, I've got all my little squares. They're so cute. I just love them. I love looking at them. This border color is Turmeric, is the second palest, I guess. I think this one is Pineapple. And that's one of the very pale combinations with a nice pale yellow. Looks so cute. It matches this fabric, which is a floral, but in my head I've taken to calling scrambled eggs. So yeah, so that one's Pineapple. And then this one is the palest yellow. This one's Banana Cream. Again, I think this is why I love quilting. I just can't stop looking at them and looking at the different combinations of fabrics and how it looks with this color versus that color, and I just love those teeny tiny details. So it was really fun to put these together, and that's the center of the block. I sewed my 192 minus 12, so I sewed my 180 flying geese into sets of 3. And so now I have 64 sets of 3, although 4 are in that block. So now I have 60 of these. And I didn't pick these randomly, not entirely. I did them color by color. So I took, say, these pale ones when they were all singles, and I started laying them out in groups of 3, and if I ended up with one that had too many the same or similar, I would just trade them around a little. So I didn't work too hard on it. The one thing I decided my line would be was I don't mind if there's 2 of the same fabric in one of these stacks. Like you can see this one has 2 of the honeycomb. But I didn't want there to be another pair. So there will be maximum 2 matching patterns in these blocks of 3, and then a lot of them are all individual. Like these are all 3 are different. This one, these 2 are the same. I didn't agonize too hard over it, apart from just trying to make sure that that didn't happen, that there were multiple pairs, or 3s. Like I didn't want 3 honeycomb in here, but 2 is fine. So again, that's the pale one. Conan hair. That's the next one. Again, I love it when these 2 opposing dots are beside each other, because these ones are like, the background is a color and the dots are white and they're big, and then this one, the background is the white or the cream and the dots are multi-yellow. And as you can see, when I was putting the flying geese together, I didn't mind if I had 2 of the sort of similar looking fabrics together. That was totally fine with me. And yeah, just tons of fun. So this yellow, this, I think pineapple yellow, is quite similar to this darkest yellow. This is the beehive fabric. And also like the dark yellow in the gingham. So like there's less contrast between this and this versus this and this. But that's just what makes quilting fun. See, here's 2 of the same dot. And so I've been like piling these on my table up until now in groups of, well, these are all the geese and these are all the squares. But now that now that these guys have a color, or that these guys have a shade of yellow that they belong to, now I'm going to start piling them by the shade of yellow. And then here's the sort of turmeric yellow. This one has a good contrast with everything, because it's darker than the darkest background anyway. Like it's very similar to the stems of these little flowers, and I guess this little sort of flowers that come in stripes. Some of these, as I was sewing them up, like flowers that I thought were on there were disappearing. This one at least has one in the center that will still be there. There are a few of these where it's basically blank, like this one. That's the only one left. It's a tiny little splotch right beside that triangle. But again, that's just what makes stuff interesting. So that's that. And then these ones will make blocks exactly the same as the one that's already up on the wall, with that darkest yellow that's pretty much brown, not really yellow anymore. It's a good 4th color to be the darkest of all these yellows that I've been doing. But yeah, excited about these. And they'll go nicely with these. So you can see that gets put on, one of those gets put on there. You know it's going the other way, they're pointing at. The arrows point at the little center square. But yeah, so the next thing really is starting to make the squares. So I think the next step is sewing 2 geese blocks to one of these to make a big line. And then you put the little triangles on the ends of the geese to make the squares that are in the corner, and then you use the big triangles to fill in the sides with the other geese. So yeah, really at this point it's full 16-inch block making, which is so exciting. I think I'm going to do one of each color next, because I've had this dark one up on my wall for so long. After I sewed the first few of the flying geese blocks, I just put one together because I just wanted to see what it would look like and how it would come together. And so now I think I'm going to do one of each of the other colors so I can put all 4 up and see them there and just get so inspired. And also at that point, then once I have those 4 done, that's a quarter of the giant blocks I need to make, because it's going to be 4 by 4. Yeah, and then I have to make decisions about sashing and stuff that'll go in between the blocks. I honestly haven't thought too much about that because it felt like I didn't know when I was going to get there, but I'm practically there now. Am I actually going to finish a quilt in the same year I started it? Because that has never happened before. But let's not get too far ahead of myself, because I still have to turn these with these squares. Here's my squares for the rest of it to turn into the little triangles on the end, like here, and then the big triangles on the sides that come from these squares in all my various yellows. I still have to do that, and then I still have to sew them into big rows with the sashing and figure all that out. So I'm not there yet, but it's feeling like I might have a quilt, like a summer quilt, maybe even done in the summer. So I just sat down to film this, and as you can maybe able to tell, the lights are on. It's a kind of a gray day outside, so there wasn't much light without the lights on. But earlier, my power went out, only for about 10 minutes, but it's got me thinking, is that going to keep happening today? Is that going to be today's thing? So I think I'm going to get sewing on some of these big blocks in case the power goes out again and then I can't use the machine. I can always record when the power's out. The light might be weird, I guess, for as long as my camera battery lasts. So I'm hoping to be back before the end of today with 1 block of each shade of yellow. See you later. Bye. So I'm sewing away. And did I just find one of these that had 2 prints the same on it? Yes, I did. Did I seam rip it apart and trade it with another one? Yes. So I found one set of 3 that had this exact combination twice. I think they were on opposite sides, but nope, couldn't do that. So I took the next one, seam ripped one of its blocks off, and now I'm sewing them back together because I want it to look random, but like organized random. It's me again, and look what I have. So I didn't end up doing one of every shade of yellow, but I finished all 4 quilt squares in this palest shade of yellow, in banana cream. Look at this. I love it. So this one will be the lowest contrast with all these pale, scrappy fabrics and then the palest yellow. So I finished all 4 of them. That means this color I am done with. They do get a little fuzzy around the edges. Like when I went to trim them, the squares are slightly bigger than the 60 inches that they need to be, but if I trim them down, like I'll be trimming down to these points, and then when I sew on the sashing, it won't be right. So you should have like a 1/4 inch above each point. And on some I do, some I don't. But I think I think I'll be able to fudge it with the sashing, and it was never going to be perfect. Something with this many pieces and this complicated. With my quilting experience or lack of experience, this one is already, like, there is not a 1/4 inch there. That's trimmed basically to that point. So when it's sewn to the sashing, we're going to lose a 1/4 inch like that all along there. But then this one on this point has more, so it's not that bad. None of them are terribly egregious, and I think it'll all blend in nicely. But I'm so happy to have gotten these done, and that means I can start on one of the next ones. I could do the 3 that belong with the brown one, I kind of want to do more of the yellow ones though, just because I haven't seen those put together. Like, I've been staring at this one for a few weeks now. So I just need to decide what out of this pile is next. I can either do this or this. I think I'm probably going to do this one next, just because it makes sense to me to work in one direction or the other, like from palest to darkest, or darkest to palest. So it's been a successful quilting weekend here. I briefly at one point thought I might just get all the squares done this weekend. Who knows? I did not. My power did not go out again. I just wanted to do other things as well and sit on the couch and scroll on my phone and take the dog for a walk and do all that sort of stuff. Here's some fun. I will show you the back. So the Birdling pattern I think is really great. I don't know if other quilt patterns do this, but what I find helpful is at every step she tells you which way to press the seams. So like press the seams towards the point, press the seams towards the solid triangle. And so it keeps everything neat and they nest nicely. And like, look how nice that little 9 patch looks. Oh, of course, I picked the one where that seam allowance accidentally got fed the wrong way through the sewing machine, but that's the only one I've found so far in this color. So it's just as neat from the back as it is from the beautiful front. But yeah, I could look at this all day. And I have been. And I do when I'm sewing them. I just look at them sometimes and pet them. As for choosing which 3 of the 3 stacks of the flying geese went with each little 9 patch, I did not do any editing of that. I might have, when I was putting these 3 flying geese together, I made sure everything was evenly distributed. And then when it comes to the point where I'm sewing all of these together, I think it doesn't really matter at that point. Like, I sort of checked to make sure like the same color wasn't all the way around the center. But apart from that, I just grabbed the next stack of geese as I needed them and sewed them on. So I need to figure out where to keep these because I want to keep looking at them, but I also need the space to work on their friends. So I think I'm probably going to stick one up along with beside that guy, and then I guess I'll have to fold them nicely and put them away somewhere safe, but I'm just going to keep taking them out to look at them. Like I said, I took some breaks for scrolling the phone and looking at Instagram. I saw another quilt pattern by a different quilt designer that was so cute, and she had done it up in like a really patchworky, scrappy set of Halloween fabrics. I really liked that. I don't need another quilt project because, like, I've already got this new quilt project this year. I need to finish some of my old quilt projects, including a Christmas quilt that I started multiple Christmases ago. So I really don't need to do that, but I might look at some Halloween fabric online a little later, maybe. So I think I said at one point, after Me Made May, when I was doing the weekly outfit roundup videos, that I was going to go back to every 2 weeks video posting schedule. But I think I've found the secret is to have different types of projects because like I've been alternating working on the quilt versus clothes, and so that's made it easy to do like an alternating videos of every 2 weeks clothes, every other week quilt. It's been fun. It's also been keeping me like on my toes with my sewing as well. And if I got bored of sewing or trimming, the trimming was the boring part of the flying geese, then I worked on some clothes and then I ended up with a really great skirt. And now I'm really excited about the quilt again. So I think having these different types of projects is doing really good stuff for my like sewing enthusiasm. So here's to hopefully a clothing video next week. I'm not sure what it'll be. I'll find out, I guess. So if you want to stick around and see that or see more of the quilt in later weeks, please subscribe, like, leave a comment, let me know you're out there. What do you think of the yellow quilt? Is it too much yellow? I don't think so. It's just so sunshiny and I love it. And I hope you love it because you're going to keep seeing it until it's done. Bye.